Hi. Hey. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Caleb Porzio. I tweet at Caleb Porzio. Well, I am Caleb Porzio, tweeting by Caleb Porzio, at Caleb Porzio. I also write blog posts at calebporzio.com. You can find them there. And I do run a podcast with my buddy, D. Cole. That's his new name. He loves to be called D. Cole by everybody. Called No Plans to Merge. We talk about Laravel stuff, and it's a really good time. So, last year, who here saw my talk last year? Okay, sweet. So it's called Embrace the Backend. And that's right. And we talked about how, maybe we went a little bit too far into the whole Vue world, and there's so much productivity that we sacrificed along the way, and how we can kind of rescue some of that productivity by bringing a little bit into the back end. But fast forward 1 year, and I can tell you that I think I was wrong, and spas are definitely the objective true one stack. And JavaScript is objectively better than PHP. So this year, my talk is titled Embrace the Front End. And we're going to talk about how Webpack errors actually build character, and all the stuff you can get done around your house when you're waiting for your dust tests to fail. I'm just kidding. We're going to launch Livewire. Who here has heard of Livewire? Awesome. Sweet. All right, so we got a couple things to do before we hit the play button or the launch button. We're going to get some background on Livewire, learn a little bit about it, why we want to use it, and we'll do a little bit of a demo. Okay, story time. So I left my job. I left my day job 6 months ago. Laughs everybody at Titan. Left my day job 6 months ago and decided to go on a sabbatical. I'd saved up my pennies, and I thought, I will climb the mountaintop, and I will receive divine insight into the nature of reality. But there's no mountains around my house, so we went to Disney World, next best thing. So we actually moved to Orlando for 2 months to escape the treacherous Buffalo winter. It is a certifiable natural disaster. But turns out, Florida has their own natural disasters in the form of face-eating dinosaurs that live in rivers that you bike by. But anyway, the sabbatical. So 2 days into my sabbatical, I came across this tweet. Because instead of meditating every day, I was scrolling Twitter. Chris McCord, he's the creator of a framework called Phoenix, which is like an MVC framework for Elixir, like Laravel or Rails. And he put out this project called Phoenix LiveView. And it was pretty bonkers, caught my eye, and this is the little write-up he did. And so he has this UI component. It's in the front end, and it's a thermostat. So he's updating it, and he claims that you can write something like this with Elixir, with back-end code, without JavaScript. So the Phoenix LiveView uses JavaScript, but you don't have to use JavaScript to write this. And so immediately, embrace the back-end guy, my ears are perked. And so this is part of the write-up. He shows kind of the code for it. And over there's like a template. It's kind of like a Blade template. But there's this weird click handler that can access a method that lives in the back-end, which is ridiculous. So I don't speak Elixir, so we'll translate it to Blade. Here's basically the equivalent in Blade. We're echoing out a value into a template. And then let's just pretend that Taylor gave us this magical attribute called Laravel click, that when somebody clicks that A tag, it fires off an inc method that lives somewhere in the backend and modifies some state and somehow re-renders the template and changes it in the front end. So this completely melted my brain as soon as I saw this, and I was completely hooked on this idea. So I made a proof of concept overnight in Laravel, and the rest is history. 6 months later, we're going to hit the launch button. So this is my little demo. That night, you can see that. Look at that hair. That's 2 a.m. hair. And so I'm doing this little click thing, and this is all WebSockets and all back-end language, and it totally was, I loved it. So how does this work? How do you accomplish something like this? So this isn't exactly how Phoenix LiveView is written or Livewire, but this gets the point across, the fundamental concept underneath these frameworks. So back to our Blade view, we have that value tag. And let's just say that we get that button, that Laravel click button, we get it in JavaScript. So we have button.addEventListenerClick. So we're saying, when you click the button, I want you to send a request off to an endpoint called run method, and then you tell them which method you want to run. You say, I want you to run the increment method, and I want you to seed it with the initial value of 1. So then the backend does its thing, it runs that method, it re-renders the template, and we get HTML in the response. Instead of JSON, we're getting HTML. And then instead of rendering the template in Vue, we're just shoving that HTML into the DOM with something like container.outerHTML. So this is kind of how it all works. So So why is this better? Why would you want to write a thermostat and make server requests every time you click a plus button? You probably wouldn't, and JavaScript's definitely a better way to accomplish that, but there's so many other things that this is really good for. But so in short, this is better because Blade is objectively better than Vue in all ways. Just like a couple people clapping, a lot of people cringing. I joke, but there are some distinct advantages. Simple workflow, there's no npm run anything, there's no webpack, there's none of that stuff. It's good old save a file, refresh the browser, and you have everything you need. Access to Laravel, this is like not trivial at all. Inside of your templates, you can access config, secret stuff. You can access auth gates, you can access every helper, you can access string helpers, like string kebab. Anyone? Okay, that's my greatest contribution to the Laravel framework. So you can access Laravel, all that stuff, and that is not to be truffled with. That is some serious power. And fast and stable tests, that's my favorite one. You can write a test where, Laravel testing, like PHP unit, you have refresh databases magic and a SQLite in memory thing, and you boot up some model with a factory, you hit an endpoint, and it runs all the way through the template and actually renders DOM all instantly alongside all your other tests. It's insane. There's no jest, there's no dust, there's no Cypress, there's no, sitting in that tangled web of stuff. It's just PHP unit and then whoop, which is awesome. And this is not news to the Rails community. Like any good concept, they're 5 years ahead of us. TurboLinks is founded on this basic concept that we can just Ajax HTML. Stimulus advocates for a lot of these things, PJAX, and Phoenix LiveView, Livewire, and Intercooler. So these are all packages that are basically built on the foundation of, hey, instead of passing JSON to the front end and letting the front end do the templating, which is the hotness at the moment, why don't we just keep the templating in the back end and then just sub it out? DHH is quoted as saying, it allows us to party with productivity like the days of yore. I love this quote, and there's a million like them, of course. But it does seem old school. Is this just DHH being old man DHH, just digging his heels into progress? I think not, but look no further than GitHub for queues. So this is GitHub, and if you open up the inspector, Chrome DevTools, and open up the Ajax requests, everything you do in GitHub opens or sends a request, and instead of returning JSON, it's HTML. Like every single time, and it just swaps it into the page. This blew my mind. You should do this. Anything you do in GitHub will follow this pattern. So here I'm searching to transfer an issue, and instead of getting JSON, it's getting this HTML and literally shoving it in there. The loading spinner is also not JavaScript. So GitHub is it enterprise? I think it's pretty enterprise. So with that is the why I introduce you to Livewire. Oh. All right, let's see some code. So this is a basic vanilla Laravel application. We have the root route that returns a view, the welcome view. So let's take a look at welcome. And welcome is just a pile of HTML. Okay, so first step, we're going to install, what's that? Am I allowed to talk to the audience? Oh, Tailwind? Nice. Cool. So yeah, definitely Tailwind. We're going to install Livewire. I'm going to show you how to install Livewire. You type composer require Porzio /Livewire. And then you hit enter, and then you wait because composer's a little bit slow, and then it works. But I already did that because Livewire is not actually public yet. So step 2 is that, Livewire assets. And that's it. Livewire is installed and ready to go. That is all you need to do to get up and running. Okay. So Livewire works like this weird hybrid thing between Blade components and Vue components, but you use them, like Blade includes. You use them like Blade includes. So anywhere you would use an include, you could just include a Livewire component. So let's say Livewire playground, okay? And then Livewire gives you this artisan make Livewire playground, and thank you for using Livewire. And we've generated 2 files here. And we'll take a look at these. Oh boy, lost our files. Here we go. All right, on the left side, we have the class part of a Livewire component. You can think of this like the script tag of your single file Vue component. And then on the right side, this would be a Blade file, just like the template tag in a Vue component. And a Livewire class, component class, all it needs to have is one render method. That's it. And the render method returns returns Blade. So anything you do in a controller where you're returning Blade, you can do it right here. You could pass data into this Blade, It's completely 100% vanilla Blade. Okay, let's swap this out with some boilerplate. Okay, so check this out already. That loaded right away. There's no little Vue.js blip, like it just loads. So it's totally SEO friendly. For the first render, you don't even need the JavaScript. It's just, basically like a fancy Blade include. Let's make it dynamic. So instead of this static 1, we'll pass in something, hopefully, dynamic. We'll pass in count, okay? And then to get count into the Blade view, these Livewire components work kind of like mailables, where public properties will just get passed to the view automatically. You could pass it through here, like any other piece of data, but Livewire wouldn't track it and be all magical, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So we re-render, and we have 2. Very good. Okay, let's add some behavior. So in Vue.js, you would do something like @click decrement, right? So Livewire takes pretty heavily from Vue syntax, so it should feel really familiar if you're a Vue developer. So we can say wire click decrement, and then here we'll say wire click increment. Okay? And now we just need to implement those methods. They just exist here. There's no little methods key or anything. They just exist as methods on the component class. So let's do that. All right. So we have a decrement method, and this is straight up PHP. We're just modifying the data property inside this class, right? Okay, here we go. Here's the big reveal moment. Oh, look at that. Crazy. So pop open DevTools, and we have the GitHub effect. Every time you do that, we're sending a request. And in the request, we're sending a little bit of data. We're saying, hey, seed it with this count, call this method. And then the response gives us some other fancy stuff, and then a big hunk of HTML. And then this uses the same core as Phoenix Live View, uses a package called morphdom to do some fancy DOM diffing. So it doesn't just wipe everything. It intelligently finds the difference and then just subs it out. Cool, so that's pretty awesome. Let's do one more little test here. So there's also data binding, which is super valuable in Vue, this vModel type thing in Vue and Angular. So if we vModeled foo in Vue, anything that's typed into the input, foo, that piece of data would now have. So Livewire has effectively the same thing. So we can say wire model, and then let's say that we echo it out right here. So echo foo, and then we'll add this piece of data right here. Foo, and then hello, Laracon. That's just too much. Okay. Refresh, fingers crossed. We type hey, and it updates. Nice. Yeah. So it took a second. It actually took an extra 250 milliseconds. Because as I typed, it's debounced. So I'm not going to send an AJAX request for every single keystroke. Other input events, you can wire model any input event or any input element, like a select element or anything like that. But so if I type really fast, it's not going to send a request. Then I let go, and it does. Nice. Okay, so here is my favorite part of the demo. Super simple, but check this out. String length, a horribly named PHP method. Imagine that. And super inconsistent with everything else. But oh, also notice I didn't have to refresh, because you barely have to refresh with Livewire because you're making these round trips. So check it out. There you go. We have the power of PHP inside of our templates, which to me is crazy. You can do so many things. And if we wanted to conditionally render something, you would think that you would be able to do something like wire if, but you don't need to because you're in Blade. So you can just do @if, and we'll say, if the string length is greater than 15, then show this little yo. All right. So then we showed that, and it worked. So real quick, here's just a fancy thing I want to show off. So in Vue, like Adam showed, there's this transition thing in Vue, these transition components, and they're pretty good. They're all right. But like he said, it's such a pain. Who here uses these things? Who here who uses Vue uses these, transition components? Okay, it's not a ton. I've always been scared of them, and they're obnoxious, and you have to keep track of all these classes and figure out which one's added at which point in the milliseconds. It's kind of crazy. But in actuality, when are we not fading and sliding? That's really what we're trying to do most of the time. At least I am. So Livewire has wire transition dot fade. Okay. And now, and I'm not going to refresh, and it should work. Here we go. So then we get a nice fade. Sweet. Thank you. You want to make it longer? We do 1 second. And Now it takes 1 second. And you can slide, and slides in. And you can change the direction, slide up, down, whatever. So there's that, but let's say you want a little bit more power. You can actually drop down to something like this, and then it'll actually use exactly Vue's system for adding transition classes, like fade enter active, stuff like that. Cool. All right, so moving along, I think we showed off the syntax enough. Let's make something a little bit more real. Okay. So instead of making a Twitter clone like I did last time, I wanted to do something a little bit different, but kind of the same functionality. So I made a clone of a new social media platform out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's called woof.com, and it's huge right now. And it's basically like Twitter, except it's whenever and wherever. And the CEO, Ryan Howard, he's a real up-and-comer. He doesn't just live, he lives. Yes, and so clearly he's got some people in here already, some coworkers, prison Mike, gotta have prison Mike. All right, so we're gonna hit bark something, and we're gonna make a little UI component to create a bark, which is essentially like a tweet. All right, so this page doesn't exist. Let's just create it. So normally you'd do route get, bark, and then you'd pass in, some blade view, and then you'd render it. But this is kind of like the Vue problem, Vue.js. Like when you have a whole blade file just for one Vue component, and then Jonathan Renning's like, well, I'll just create inertia. So Livewire does kind of a similar thing. Route, Livewire, bark, and we'll create a component called new bark that doesn't exist, and we'll see what happens. Unable to find component. That's another nice thing. I love like good, solid PHP errors, a good old stack trace that I can understand. Love it. So new bark, let's create that. Artisan, make, Livewire, new bark. All right, and then we have those two files. Open them up. Cool. So here's the new bark class, and then here's the template. Let's swap this out with a little bit of boilerplate. Bada bing, and there we go. So that header or sidebar thing is going to annoy me. So we're going to hide that. There we go. All right, so let's make this do something. For starters, let's make woof disabled by default. So you can't even touch it, but then you start to type in, and then this little woof button becomes enabled, like some implicit validation. So first thing we'll need to do is we'll want to get whatever's typed into here into a piece of data, like with wire model like you saw before. So wire model title, okay? And then we'll add it as a public property, public title equals empty string. Great. Refresh, and now when we type, it should be updating, but we have no idea of knowing. So let's conditionally render a disabled property right here. And so in Blade, when you're conditionally rendering something, you just use Blade. So let's just use Blade. Okay, so here we're saying, if the title property is empty, then show disabled. If not, don't show anything. Refresh, which we probably didn't even need to do, and type, and there we go. So it's disabled by default, and then it's not. Cool. So let's add some validation. Let's say a bark can't be longer than 15 characters. So we'll fire a little method on click of this woof. We'll call it submit. Oh, by the way, so you can pass any event here. You could be like key down, and it uses Vue syntax like pretty heavily. So you could type key down enter or anything like that, and it'll just work. You can also listen for custom events, like it's just kind of like it falls through to this wildcard listener. Cool. So click, submit, and then we'll create this right here. If autocomplete works. Okay. Validation we'll put there, and then we'll create the bark. And this is kind of like a store method in a controller, and then we'll redirect. Cool. So let's start with the validation. So if you were doing this in a store method in a controller, you would do something like this, yeah? Request, validate, pass in some data, or specify the piece of data, and then the validation. So this isn't going to work. This is kind of a point of confusion a little bit. If you think about it, you're not in a normal request cycle. Like the request is kind of Livewire's request. So this request stuff doesn't actually work, but Livewire makes it really nice for you, and you can just do this validate. And this arrow validate works exactly like the request validator, except it references the data inside of your component. And it completely acts like it, so you could add in custom messaging here. It throws the actual validation exception, so none of this will get executed. And it also makes the normal Blade errors bag available to the Vue. So you can do anything that you would normally do with validation errors. All of your snippets, they all work. So let's just use Laravel's fancy new error directive, error title message, all right? So if there's a title error, then show that message. And let's see what happens. So we type a bunch of characters, hopefully over 15, and your bark is too long. Okay, and then it disappears. Nice. So that's great, but what have we done that we couldn't just do with a normal form, right? Let's add some real-time validation to that input element. So real-time validation is one of the strong points of Livewire. It's super easy with something like this. So there's lifecycle hooks in Livewire components. There's mount, and you can actually pass stuff into Livewire components, but we only have 30 minutes. So you can mount, you can also update it, and this will run every time the component is updated, every time there's a round trip. But let's say you have a bunch of different data and you want to like keep it to just one piece of data, so you can scope it by just kind of magically referencing the piece of data. So we'll say when title is updated, then let's just run all that validation right here. Whoopsie. Okay, and and now as we type, when we get to 15 characters, we're going to get that real-time validation. Nice. Sweet. All right, so let's create the bark, and right now this is just like eloquent. Create the bark, here's the title, grab it out of the property, and then redirect. So this is another one that you'd think that you could do something like this, right? But that's not how Livewire works because it's not a normal request and response. So I have this arrow redirect helper that you can redirect to any route. Okay, so let's see this happen. Hey there, you. And there you go. Okay, so we added it. It showed up there. Pretty cool. We got the real-time validation, which was nice, but still there's a full page load between the two. But so Livewire components, they're atomic, so we can put them anywhere. So let's swap out this bark something with the actual Livewire component. All right. So here's the little template for it. We have this bark something. We're going to swap this out with the component. Too easy. Livewire, new bark. Okay, refresh, and there we go. It's right there. But still, so that's cool, but you know it's still a full page reload, so I'm not impressed yet. Let's do something a little bit fancier. So you can nest Livewire components, and they can talk to each other with this like global event system. So let's rip all of this out and put it into its own Livewire component. Okay. Livewire, call this show barks, and then artisan make Livewire show barks. Okay. So show barks, and then we'll replace all this stuff with what we just ripped out, and there we go. But, so Livewire doesn't inherit the scope, kind of like a blade component. It doesn't inherit the scope of the surrounding blade. So now this little bark is going to throw an error, and there it is. So again, to me, this is like a feature in itself that you just get undefined barks. It's great, like right in there. It's Laravel. Great, so for each bark, so we need to get barks into here, and we pass this in just like we would inside a controller. So let's pull the exact code from the route right here. Okay. And stick it in right there. Now refresh, and we are back in action, but still, we've just got back to where we were. If I do something, it's still going to be a full page reload. Okay, so here we go. Let's open new bark. So this is the new bark component on the right. That's this one here, and then this is show barks that kind of wraps around it. So instead of redirecting, we can emit an event. So we'll emit new bark. And you can pass like parameters into these events and stuff like that. And then after we admit that, let's clear out the title because we're not doing a full page reload. So you kind of see like view patterns emerge because it's a very similar paradigm. So this is totally something I would do in Vue.js. Cool. So emit that event, and now in the wrapping component, we can listen for the event with a little listeners property. And you can listen for events, and it's just a map. So it's a map between events and then the method to run on the component. In this case, I don't want to run a method. I just want to refresh it, so I have this little magic refresh token. Cool. All right, so with any luck, hey there, oh, validation. And there we go. Check it out. Nice. And inside there, that little nice animation, it's a wire transition, but it's like done the old-fashioned way. There's slide down dot enter active, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So that's pretty awesome. Let's kick it up one level further. So let's say that you wanted to have, like, in actual Twitter, when you type, there's the little letter counter or something like that. Let's say you wanted a letter counter. Livewire would be horrible for something like that. You could do it, but it would be slower and annoying, and it would kind of look bad. So there's sometimes that you really want JavaScript, and one big time is like reactive input elements like tags or multi-selects or date pickers, stuff like that. So this is, so strap yourselves in. Let me make sure this all still works and I didn't just ruin everything. Okay, so new bark here. So let's just wipe this whole text area And I have an actual Vue component called Bark input. So Vue.js, refresh. And so this component just kind of shows up the letters counting and has a little bit of implicit validation. Cool. That's fine, but it's not linked up yet. So how do we link it up? Anything that you can vModel, you can wire model. So Livewire is intelligent. It knows, and when it finds a Vue component, it ignores the changes in the Vue component, and it just listens for those Vue input events and passes value down. So anything that you can vModel, feel free to wire model. And now we have something that it's working both ways. So it's Vue and Livewire. They're both talking to each other. And it's kind of like a have your cake and eat it too type thing. Sweet. Hey! Cool. All right, so we're almost there. Like if we had some loading indicator like ... you could do wire loading, and it would show whenever like the component is making a full request. So you can show loading indicator. There's no little blip. There's no vcloak. It's just hidden by default, and then it'll show when you need it. There's tons of other stuff. There's wire poll. So you can like poll like every 300 milliseconds or something, or pull a specific method every so often if you want to get some reactivity. Oh, there's echo. So if you wanted to use something, like if you have, let's say every time we created a new Bark, you used Laravel echo to like broadcast an event and Pusher like did all its thing. If you have all that like wired up already for your app, Livewire just works pretty much automatically. So you could do echo, like Bark's new Bark. And then, sorry, this would be in the listener, and then it would fire off whatever you put here. So that's pretty cool. So you can get like actual WebSocket type real-time stuff. If you had two people in separate parts of the world, they could interact with each other's thing just with Livewire. So pretty cool. Magic, I know. All right, sweet. So one last thing. Testing, right. New Bark test. How do we test things in Livewire? So Livewire has its own kind of testing API. And it's all just in Laravel testing, so there's no need to run any JavaScript, anything, or any browser runtime. So can add new Bark. We say Livewire test, set the title to something, and call a method, and make sure that something exists in the database. Run that test, and bam, we're passing. Can't add new Bark if longer than 15 characters. Set something to really long, call submit, and then I added this assert C so you can see that like it's keeping track of the rendered DOM, and you can assert against that rendered DOM. So you can make like changes, fake a click or something like that, assert against the DOM, and then assert stuff in your database. And it's all like wicked fast, just like any of your Laravel tests. So bam, you could actually TDD components like really nicely with this. Sweet. So cool, we're getting there. That's basically, that is the basics of Livewire right there. So Livewire is out, livewireframework.com, it's not live yet. Livewireframework.com exists and all the docs are up, so you can check them out. There's so much I didn't go over. There's spa mode, like with turbo links, you can basically make like this weird SPA thing that you can just have all those route live wires and it's all like SPA feeling. There's all sorts of stuff, transitions, testing stuff, nesting, events, validation, loading states, all that good stuff. So give that a check out if you care. And are we ready to do it? Let's go back to the slides. Okay, we won. Hooray! We wrote one endpoint for just to load the page instead of all these Ajax endpoints that you have to write API tests for, and then maybe contract tests for your jest tests that rely on mocks and all that stuff, and then you get mock drift. So we don't have to do any of that, just one endpoint. 0 loading states. We never wrote this dot loading. I didn't show you the wire loading, but you would use that instead of that. 0 millisecond build time. Builds just like that. You don't even have to refresh most of the time. And 9.6 kilobytes of JavaScript, and that's the whole bit of JavaScript that you need to make it all happen. And fast, simple tests, which I dearly love. So it's v0.1. It's not a 1.0 yet. I have like 85 people in the repository right now, and we're all using it, and we're finding bugs and fixing stuff, but it's not necessarily ready for prime time yet. So get into the repo, try using it in your projects, see what happens, submit issues, and we can make this thing something viable. All right, let's just do it. Let's hit the red button. I wish there was a red button. Well, it's kind of red. All right, so the danger zone. Make public. DevTools? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Does someone else understand? Okay, is that it? Did that do it? Make private, it did it! Hooray! That's it. Go forth. Make Livewire things. Thank you.